Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Ino Tayuya and Konan? Part 1. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, so without wasting any time let's get into the video. Within the thick lush forest surrounded by hills and cliffs, a dark figure was seen perched on a tree, with his blue eyes set dead center on the shrubs below. "This is it," he muttered, fluttering his eyes once more around the area. Even under the afternoon sun, its light failed to breach through the canopy, masking the area in near twilight darkness. A perfect place for a hideout. "Now where are you hiding?" He sat down on the branch with his legs crossed and closed his eyes. Not a moment too soon, an orange pigment started forming around his eyelids, connecting him one with nature. He could feel the gentle breeze swing the leaves above and down to the colony of ants working on their daily routine. He could visualize the network of tunnels created by these little critters down to where they kept their queen, spawning eggs which were being picked up by her workforce. Now he could feel a very odd gape in the dirt, spewing out a putrid smell containing a bunch of chemicals that could only be picked up by an animal or a very skilled ninja. "There you are," the whiskered man mused. 15 active chakra signatures, 30 faint ones, and hella lots of corpses. He visibly scowled. "Too bad that bastard isn't in there, but I'll be glad to play around with the things you call toys." He opened his eyes and stood up with an expression that could kill. Standing at 6 feet tall, the man wore a dark blue Jounin vest and black long-sleeved shirt inside. An equipment pouch around his waist and black cargo pants with another pouch on his right leg. Bending his knees forward into a jumping stance, the black ninja sandals squeaked as he let his body fell forward. Blood rushed through his veins as his calf muscles tensed, creaking the branch on his feet. One could even see the foxy grin entrenched on his face before he propelled down like a rocket fired from a cannon. A moment ago. "Is the patient prepped for procedure?" a masked surgeon asked, walking down the dimly lit hallway along with his assistant. "For the 5th time, yes sir. Ready as she was an hour ago," he stated, obviously annoyed of his senior's tardiness. He recoiled slightly at his junior's jab. "Come on man, don't blame me for it. The patient Kabuto-sama sent was a bloody nightmare to work with. He expected me to stabilize a man whose internals were in complete shambles. And now he's dead. I might as well hang myself before I turn into one of his monsters." He cried out, sweat pouring down his protective uniform. "Shit dude. But it's alright," he assured him. "The guy was just a throwaway. The subject we're going to work on now is his prized possession and in good condition. Luckily, she'll be fairly straightforward to handle." Here he passed the clipboard over to his colleague. He skimmed through the profile with an intent gaze. 20 years old, coma for 6 years, inject subject with MK6174, revive subject if possible, observe effects, proceed with absolute caution. He sighed tiredly for being up awake for over 20 hours. Grunting, he flipped to another page and stopped dead in his tracks. "Oh, you gotta fucking kidding me. What's wrong?" Concerned, he eyed the clipboard to see him flipped onto the profile picture of the subject. "We're working on her," he sputtered, fear reaching his eyes. "Yeah. Fuck me. This is a huge risk." "What are you talking about?" "Fucking great," he sighed exasperatedly before turning to his partner. "Since you're practically new here, I'll summarize it for you. Project MK has been going on for almost a decade, and all previous attempts had resulted in catastrophe. Even if the subjects had their minds broken or utterly brain dead, they will go into rampage and die, or just die once receiving a dose of MK. Not even a cursed seal would stop them. As a matter of fact, subjects with the cursed mark are 10 times much more dangerous. So to put it simply, fail or succeed, we're dead." He snapped his gloved fingers. "Exactly, we can't test it on a guinea pig or onto another live subject. All MKs are different as they're made for a specific subject. Orochimaru-sama was very particular about this. What's crazy, Kabuto-sama requested not 1 dosage, but 10 times more than the necessary amount. Is he actually trying to kill her?" He shuffled his feet, nervously scratching the back of his head before pointing a finger up like an idea had popped. Maybe he made a breakthrough. He deadpanned. "Without sufficiently testing the after effects that may result the death of the patient. If he did, why push it onto us instead of doing it himself? He could have at least provided us with some data." Both swallowed a huge lump once they reached the operation room. They exchanged fearful looks behind their masked visage before opening the double doors. The chamber was dark for the exception of the overhead light beaming down onto the patient strapped on a hospital bed. A band of electronic medical instruments surrounded her with a heartbeat monitor beating in long intervals. Pushing their worries to the back of their heads, they decided to proceed on with the procedure with a calm, cold-like demeanor. They studied her vitals and state before heading on to the main event. "Bring him in," the head doctor ordered. Pushing the tray into the light was a briefcase. He unlocked it with a number code before opening it to reveal within filled with exactly 10 test tubes containing an ominous purple liquid carefully stored in soft styrofoam. They then extract the liquid into their syringes, neatly placing them side by side onto a tray. Standing opposite of each other by the bed, they nodded to each other and began operating their test subject. Begin the injection procedure. High. 1 left wrist. 2 right wrist. 3 left thigh. 4 right thigh. How are her vitals? The assistant investigated the monitor, face scrunched. Unchanged. Affirmative, proceed. 6 heart. 7 liver. 8 neck. 9 bladder. Beep. They immediately turned their heads towards the monitor to see her heart rate had increased by 10%. They halted the procedure and started reading her vitals. Minutes passed and they observed her heart rate continued to maintain at a steady frequency. Unresponsive and unchanged. The head doctor breathed out a sigh of relief. Scared me half to death. He picked up the clipboard and read over the instructions once more. Inject her brain, of course, he voiced half expectantly and rolled his eyes, then noticed his assistant had prepped the specialized drill. It's ready, sir. The final step. He muttered, leveling his gaze at the tool. Yes, sir. Hand it over, I'll do it. Here you go. Thank you, turn her over. His assistant did as instructed and combed up her red hair. The drill already filled with MK6174, the doctor pressed the trigger a couple of times before carefully aligning it onto a specific part of her head. Now for the cerebellum. Meanwhile, he dodged the booby traps, silently incapacitated multiple guards, and set free the prisoners deprived of their spirit. He frowned at their weakened state, silently contemplating as they painfully grunt and moaned at his sudden appearance, eyes widening as big as they possibly could. Copies of the whiskered shinobi appeared beside him in a puff of smoke before they escorted the captives out of their cages and into the outside world they longed for. The original stood alone in the dark chamber with his arms crossed, thinking, listening, sensing. Then he felt a bleep in the distance, buried in pitch black darkness, but grasping to dear life. He turned around and with a single step, he disappeared in a gust of wind. Appearing before the double steel doors with his knee to his chest, with a swift kick, he forced them flying off their hinges and into their respective directions, knocking out a pair of unfortunate surgeons. Walking in, he crooked his brow at the unconscious red-heated person strapped on the hospital bed. Head facing down as blood trickled down to the cold floor forming a small puddle. His right hand was immediately shrouded in orange chakra as he placed his open palm onto the surgically opened wound. A moment had passed and the sound of the dripping echo fade away along with the glow of his hand. Sighing, he undid the straps holding down her limbs and gently turned her over. He did a double take. The hurt was unmistakable. Her narrow visage. Her undeniably pinkish red hair. She was involved in the assassination of the third Hokage. She battled his group to retrieve that bastard. She was supposedly killed by Tamari of the Sand. She was part of the abolished Sound 4. She was Tayuya of the Sound. Anyone would be alarmed when he took out a kunai before plunging it into her straps. Without a layer of clothing covering her skin, he spawned his old sage cloak he first used in the battle for Konoha fighting pain. He wrapped a clean white towel around her, then shrouded her with his cloak. Picking her up to a piggyback, he would have noticed the cursed seal on her neck had begun to pulsate before fading away like a burning piece of paper. With Senin mode still active, he took a single step and disappeared instantly. And now it begins. 5 days later. 3 years had passed since the invasion of Konoha that turned the village into a literal crater. All focus were shifted into its revival, and they had the Kazakage to thank too for the imperative supply of raw materials. Their stagnant economy had since boosted, turning the formerly ravaged village into a bustling modern city, but it never lost its identity, for the faces of the 5 Hokages still loomed over, watching over their populace. In the center of a public park had a particular bronze statue erupted on a pedestal, with many surrounding posing for a photo. Standing with his arms crossed, wearing a familiar cloak and a wavy shinobi headband. The artist had memorized his face from all the photos and reluctant interviews, whiskered and the look that inspired thousands. His signature foxy grin. Engraved in marble on the pedestal titled Uzumaki Naruto. Hero of Konoha. Bringing her here wasn't part of the mission. Said the 5th Hokage, leveling her stern gaze at the spiky-haired blonde. As the person who wrote out the mission, which is you, it stated. Rescue all prisoners and test subjects. You gave me full authority over the mission and I'm ready to take responsibility no matter the consequence. He stated, standing his ground in the presence of authority. I'm ready to give my arms away even if it means giving her another chance. She refrained from clicking her tongue, knowing the adamant blonde would do exactly just that. Sighing, the buxom woman leaned onto her armchair. I know you're not a brat anymore, but her very presence is putting everyone on edge, especially Shikamaru. Would you deny that? He shook his head, not knowing the proper answer. Shizune's face softened, petting Taunton's head. Why are you so keen on protecting her? They gave him a moment to answer for himself, a well-needed skill he had to earn in order to move on. I want to help her. I want to know what she thinks, how she lives, how she can cope when the world had already moved beyond what she can recognize. See if she is capable of change. If I can't do either of those, how can I possibly help Sasuke? Tsunade lifted her brow. Are you implying that you could persuade her to join our ranks? That wasn't my intention, but when I heard she put up quite a fight against Shikamaru, she'll be amongst one of the trickiest Genjutsu users in our arsenal. Stated the Jounin, hoping they would buy it. He was right, though. The village lost plenty of their specialist mind benders from the invasion, and the Sound Girl joining in would be beneficial to their cause. The Hokage and her assistant shared the same look before nodding and went back to the Uzumaki. It is difficult for me to deny such a personal request from you, as long as I sit here, but for the opportunity that is presented us I will allow you to watch over her. Taking out a document from the drawer, she stamped her insignia and handed it over to the stunned blonde with a cheeky smile. She's now in your care. His face crunched as he read it and produced a puzzled gaze at them. You knew I'd do this. He motioned at the approval form that was made in advance. She shook her shoulders and casually waved it off. You're not that unpredictable when it comes to charming others in order to help someone. When she said that, he scratched the back of his head in embarrassment with a huge grin. Off you go, brat. She's still asleep, but you might catch her when she's awake. He hastily folded the paper into his jacket and proceeded to run straight to the doors as he waved them from behind his shoulders with a beaming smile. Thanks, Bachan. I owe you one. That's Hokage-sama to you, damn brat. The door closed and they watched through the window to see him running across the compound into the direction of the hospital. A small smile grew as they longingly stared at his back. He's grown up so fast. She sighed endearingly, hugging the piglet affectionately like as if it was the blonde. Boink. Folding her arms beneath her breasts, she thumbed her chin and thought. Someone with that kind of gift is probably a good idea to be on your side, not to mention useful. Shizune nodded in agreement. Look where I am now. Slaving away in paperwork while that brat gets to be out there and make actual change. I almost envy him. Don't sell yourself short, Tsunade-sama. Your decision to make him fully independent was the right choice. Her assistant assured her. I don't doubt it, but I couldn't help but to feel a bit insecure when he goes onto missions by himself. It might simply be her maternal instincts calling out, but it wasn't just about it. They hardly heard any news pertaining the Akatsuki since he defeated the leader of the group, Pain. They could have gone underground and continued development, but it was all speculation by that point with no concrete data to back up. The threat still exists. Turning her back from the window, she started walking towards the door. Come on Shizune, let's give our new guest a special visit. A teardrop appeared on the side of her head. Aren't you just excusing yourself to get away from work? Walking down the hallway of the hospital, Naruto spotted his pineapple-haired friend standing on guard and called out to him. Yo. Shika. It's about time you showed up. He snickered, facing the sheepish blonde. I assume Hokage-sama finally allowed you to see her. It's more than just that. He implied, noticing a tint of red from the corner of his eyes, and faced the viewing window. How is she? The Nara folded his arms and stood next to the blonde, gazing into the room. Surprisingly. She seemed to fare much better than the last time I saw her. Was she awake? Nodding, he continued. She woke up a couple of days ago around midnight and our security cameras found she was walking aimlessly around the room, then stared outside the window for almost half an hour like a gargoyle before heading back to sleep. She's well fed and hadn't treated the staff with any discontent kind of and the cloak you gave her. What about it? She wouldn't sleep without it. His former classmate shifted his brow and pointed at the pillow the girl currently had her head on. It was wrapped in his own cloak while a trail of saliva slipped from the corner of her mouth, staining it. When the nurse was about to replace the pillowcase, she made quite a scene and insists on keeping it. And said if anyone touches it, I'll fucking jab a scalpel down your blowhole. Something like that. Naruto chuckled nervously. So she's the same as I remembered. Shikamaru sighed dejectedly. Unfortunately, exactly the same as I remembered. Except he took out a clipboard and skimmed over it. We couldn't find the curse mark on her. He tilted his head, looking at the sleeping Redeed intending to find what was off. Didn't you said she transformed into some kind of a demon when she fought you? I did. The same way as did the Sound 4. And didn't you report the room she was in was something like out of Frankenstein before blowing up the entire underground system? He jabbed him. Naruto shrugged his shoulders. I burned everything to the ground. No one should be subjected to those experiments, nor should anyone stumble upon those research papers. I will not allow these kinds of things to be repeated. Not on my sight. From the corner of his eyes, Shikamaru noticed the subtle change in his voice and his clenching fist. That's fine. I understand you completely. Continuing on, the blonde switched his gaze to the clipboard. After the doctors screened her, she seems to be in perfectly good health. Nothing in her system that would cause an alarm. No sign of the curse mark appearing even when she's pissed off. However, her psychological state remains in question. All in all, she can be discharged as soon as she's awake. That's great, he smiled at the news and returned to the window with a wide look on his face. You mean like now? Yeah, he looked up at the window. When she's awake. There she was, standing before them with only a few layers of glass separating them. Naruto waved to her, but she didn't respond, only an empty look on her face. He moved back and forth, side to side to see if she can see him from the other side. She seemed to turn her head when he was out of view. He then made funny faces, stretching his cheeks open and saucer eyes that would make a baby cry. Naruto then leaned into the equally confused Shikamaru. Can she see us? He whispered. No way. It's a one-way mirror. He replied quietly, completely unnerved by her blank expression. Even if a racket would occur in the hallway, the sound would not travel into the room. Oh, is that so? He sighed in relief. He folded his arms and leaned into the window to get a better look of her face. Her hair seems all messy, but I can understand, she just woke up. Heh, I sort of like it. It makes her look adorable. And see, suddenly, a feminine hand shot out from the glass, gripping his neck into a choking hold. Shikamaru took a step back, shocked. You'd. He was then pulled into the window, shattering it completely, and was sent flying across the room, slamming his face onto the opposite wall. He felt her iron grip on the scruff of his neck and was lifted off his feet, cheek pressed onto the wall. Shikamaru recovered from his stun and immediately made a seal which sent his shadow to be conjoined with hers. Stand down. If I feel you struggle one bit, I won't hesitate to knock you out. Before he finished his sentence, 3 Anbus appeared behind her with their blades hovering above her neck, back and shoulder. Fuck, thought Naruto, not considering his safety, but the danger presented onto her. Shikamaru. What? He responded, maintaining his technique to force her to statue. You can pull back, he was about to retort, but he cut him off. If she make any other sudden movements, feel free to stop her. And the rest of you, stand down. He motioned at the operatives. I know you're under Bachan, but just hear me out, let me handle this. They looked at each other, and when one of them nodded, they went back into shadows, followed by Shikamaru undoing his shadow, but remained in the room. So a cheek still pressed, he figured he could at least break the ice. How are you feeling? He could barely make eye contact with her browns. You're that brat, she muttered, sizing the blonde up, and picked up something peculiar about him. She narrowed her gaze, memories slowly flooding back at her. You're that fucking shithead, and you, she scowled from the corner of her eyes to the person behind her. Shikamaru glared back, eventually felt the stare down was reaching its boiling point, knowing he was losing all along. Before you guys decide to gouge each other eyes out, can you please let me down? It's difficult to breathe here. He split apart the tension by voicing out his apparent discomfort. He could feel her razor-sharp glare piercing the back of his head, and tear dropped. Well, be it your way. Shika, has anyone briefed on her yet? Being the enemy of the state and designated rogue shinobi since her country no longer acknowledged she exists, so no. Shikamaru asserted firmly, and she visibly startled. That was news to her. That's one way to put, mused the blonde. Anyway, I discovered one of Orochimaru's labs and found you were being operated and intervened. I briefly read the report about you, and you've been in a coma for 6 years. 6 years, she pressed in harder to the point he could hear the wall cracking. Shikamaru was about to act and noticed a don't sign on his hand. Why the fuck I was out for that bloody long? What the fuck did they do to me? Raping my sorry ass, my team is dead. My shithole country is dead to me. I'd rather kill myself. She was about to pour out more of her pent-up rage when a wave serenity washed over her. Like she was standing on an endless open ocean without a wave that could disturb her. Slowly, she landed him to his feet and loosened her grip. She stared at his back, not in confusion, but in relief. Before her hand could drop to her side, he took it, enveloping his warmth before turning around to face her. Toad-like eyes turning back to azure. I can't reverse the misdeeds that had been done onto you. I wish I could, but I don't have that kind of power. I know what it's like to be left behind, forgotten and tossed away. Used and dismantled bit by bit. I know your pain all too well. But what I can provide is another chance in life. You don't have to forget your wrongdoings, that is up to you to decide, but I'd advise you to learn from it. I want to help you to get back up on your feet, not for the betterment of others, but for yourself. I don't want you to suffer. I want you to live. Anyone with half a brain would drone out with a stone-faced serious expression to relate to the gravity of the situation. But what this knuckled head did instead was grinning like a tenacious fox. Leering with an unrelenting passion that could rival a blazing inferno. She got caught up in it. Recovering herself, the sound girl swept her hand away and folded her arms, discerning him with a narrow gaze. Fine. I'll take up whatever you offer, just don't expect me to always go along with it. She said in quiet empathy, giving herself up to the strange blonde. Heh. I knew you'd come along. Come on, let's get you off those robes and get some clothes. Grinning ear to ear, he walked past her to grab the spare apparel he brought from home. She tagged closely behind, and Shikamaru watched with intent until the moment she was already beside him. They never exchanged their gaze nor words as they instantly understood the grudge separating between them. As soon as she left, a bead of sweat trailed down his forehead as he wearily sighed. A single Anbu appeared, then handed him a letter and disappeared. He read it and chuckled lightly, resisting the temptation to smack his head. Hey, I hope you know what you're getting into because I sincerely doubt you did. Putting his hands inside his pockets, he walked out of the room to go home and sleep. Later. After changing back to his civilian attire, which consists of a white t-shirt and striped orange jacket, shin-height black khaki shorts and black sandals, he sat down in the lobby whilst waiting for his companion to bathe and change. He can't wait to show her around the village. He grinned, formulating his next plan of action. It was already noon, and the clock ticked with each passing rhythm of the blonde's patient finger tapping. Another 30 minutes and he resort to tapping his foot. It's no big deal, girls usually take this long to get ready. No biggie. Said the whiskered blonde, assuring himself that she would come out of that hallway in the next 10 minutes. Yeah. 2 hours later. The clock ticked along, and we now see the savior of Konoha doing what any common folk do inside a hospital, arms folded, head bobbing. He unconsciously leaned his head to the side with his body followed suit, which forced him awake midway, but it was too late. A resounding knock echoed throughout the lobby, and we later see him walking down the hallway rubbing the side of his head, seemingly annoyed. Where the heck is she? He called out to a pair of patrolling nurses and asked for a certain redeed. Both giggled unexpectedly and pointed down to the east section. He thanked them and went his way. What was that about? The east section was the children's section. Stagnant white walls emerged with blue of oceans and lagoons. The ambience here was dramatically different than the depressing tone of which he came. He perked up hearing joyous laughter of adolescents and a number of amused staff members standing in front of wide viewing window. Looking in, he was pleasantly surprised by what he saw. Wearing a slightly oversized red top and black shorts, she knelt down and extended her arms. Get over here, you little twerp. Grinned the redeed as she grabbed a child by his waist and tickled his sides, causing him to roll around the floor laughing. A young girl sneakily poked her side, which made her yelp. The girl promptly ran away as she chased her around the tiny playground. Gotcha. The girl happily flailed her arms around and more kids joined in on the fun. At the end, the school ganged up on her and she was pinned to the floor as they stack on top of each other one after another. Laughing hysterically without a care in the world. An hour later. Nap time arrived sooner than expected as she stuffed the last child with a blanket. The staff politely thanked her and bowed, which she returned before waving to them over her shoulder. She silently slid the door close and turned around to see the blonde sleeping on the bench with a dorky look on his face. Snoring without restraint. She put down the duffel bag and stood over him before crouching down, closer to his ear. You saw me, didn't you? Muttered the redeed, gazing at his silly smile. It was you, right? She opened the duffel bag and took out the blood-red cloak. Running her fingers along the battle-worn cloth lead to the locks of his yellow hair. She smiled softly, thank you for giving me this chance. She then leaned forward with her eyes closed. Blue eyes went wide as Naruto jerked up, blinking in a daze. Come on, shithead. We're going out or not? The feminine voice made him spun around to see her back facing him, eyeing the blonde from her shoulder. He stood up, scratching the back of his head sheepishly. Heh, sorry. Haven't slept for days worrying about you. She looked straight, hiding her blush. I can make you sleep and never wake up, would that sound fair for ya? Naruto scratched his whiskered cheek, feeling an odd warm sensation from it. There's many like me who wished for it. He mused and continued. But the real deal will always be the best. Whatever. She hastily grabbed his hand and strut forward. Let's get out of here. This place feels like a maze. He snickered at the poor attempt to hide her embarrassment. Oh, it sure is. Sliding open the door to his favorite establishment, he called out to the owner across the small restaurant. You. Oji-san. Gucci turned his head from the cooker and grinned. Look who's back at it again. Naruto. I see you've been doing some shopping. Ordering the usual. The peace sign walking between the rows of chairs and tables while waving to the regular patrons. Make it double, old man. You got a new customer in town. He perked up, noticing a person of pinkish red hair peering over the blonde's shoulder. Come on, don't be shy. Introduce yourself. The woman scowled at him as she shoved him away. Say that one more time and I make sure you'd be too embarrassed to show your face. A sense of familiarity was stirring inside him when he got a good look of her. She reminded him of a customer he had a couple decades ago. Turning down the boiler, he faced her with a $1,000 smile. My boy never failed to impress me. Heh. He put his hands to his waist and puffed his chest. The name's Tuchi Ichiraku. And I make the best ramen in town. Tayuya. She flatly said, dejecting the owner. Though she seemed to have a curious look as she looked around the restaurant and tilted her head at the pot of boiling noodles. Naruto leaned over the counter to whisper at his ear. She never had ramen in her life. Make the best she would die for. The wide determined smile plastered his face and he was engulfed in flames. Coming right up. He turned into the flash, chopping ingredients, stir-frying dishes and all that jazz. Dusan, did I hear you screaming? The beautiful brunette assistant appeared from the back and whistled in amazement once she saw her passionate father zipping from one place to another. She then gasped candidly at the person sitting in front of the counter. Naruto-kun. You're finally back home and safe again. Oh Am-chan, you look great as always. She giggled to herself and tippy-tapped her way and grabbed the stunned blonde from over the counter and nuzzled her cheek against his spiky soft hair. We haven't seen you for over 2 weeks and I got worried when our sales plummeted by 10%. He deadpanned at being treated as a promotional piece. Is this what's it all about? He muffled flatly, though feeling quite embarrassed at the love he was receiving, not to mention the soft pillows on his face that he would happily sleep on for the rest of his life in this world and thereafter. Yes, even if she had that kitchen smell, her aroma would be the equivalent of a field of chrysanthemum and mountaintop fresh air. Should we be doing this? Your boyfriend wouldn't like it if he suddenly came barging in. She let go of him, put her hands on her hips, and pridefully stood her ground before pointing at him. The only person I'll allow barging into my life is you, Naruto-kun. Declared the brunette with fire in her eyes. And Nani? She smiled smugly at his gawking expression. Oh, don't be like that, Naruto-kun. I've known you for far longer than anyone else, and I know you wouldn't pass the chance at seeing your lovely chef's beautiful body. Time stood still for both Tuchi and Naruto. They stared at each for the longest time until the old man broke into a perverted grin and the blonde felt a cold freezing shiver blitzkrieging down his spine. Am blushed when she finally caught on. I didn't mean it like that. Tuchi laughed like a dolphin and went back to his work as Naruto breathed a huge sigh of relief, profusely trying to calm himself down. She sighed, deadpanning her gaze at the both of them as she poured out a glass of refreshments. Geez, I can't believe you two. It was only then she noticed there was another person watching the whole ordeal. Oh. Haven't seen you around here before. Is she your friend? I guess you could say that. He took the glass and offered it to his companion. She's not from around here so please be nice to her. The female chef slid her feet to the reed and kindly smiled. My name's Am and I'm the daughter of that old man over there. Pleased to meet you. The former sound shinobi simply gave an apathetic look. Tayuya. I like to play the flute and bust faces. Is that so? Chuckled the brunette before humming inwardly. May I sure have nice hair. She motioned her to come closer causing her to raise a brow, but complied nonetheless. Did you know Naruto-kun like girls with red hair? He said it can be a turn on as well. Naruto was watching in curiosity as he drank and suddenly was given a disgusted look by the reed. He spat his drink. What? Am-chan, what did you tell her? The chef straightened her back giving him an innocent look. Oh, nothing. Just something us girls should be wary about. About what? Don't worry about it. You two should enjoy yourselves while I help Tusan with lunch. Jane. With a cheeky smile she turned around leaving the pair in an obvious state of disarray. Naruto's head was in shambles as he watched her walk away, internally screaming for her to come back to lift away the awkward atmosphere. Tapping his glass profusely, he peered to the corner of his eyes to see Tayuya staring at her glass with a neutral gaze. Face scrunched and streak of red across her cheeks. Gulping, he mastered whatever courage he had left and put it into words. Hey, ooh. Don't talk to me. That squandered him like a ton of bricks and he remained there for the next 5 minutes. Your order's up. Tuchi announced, reviving the blonde and Cam putting in the final touches before presenting it to them. Enjoy. Thanks they both muttered, splitting apart their chopsticks and stir it around their bowls. Before Naruto dig in, he looked to his companion to see how her first impression would be like. Raising the noodles up to her lips, she scarfed her red hair behind her ear and such a simple gesture made Naruto jump a bit. Once the noodles touched her tongue, there was a brief moment's shock in her eyes as she swallowed the rest. Naruto's heart sank when he saw tears were welding up in those brown orbs. It's good. What? Said all three spectators, surprised when she continued digging into her food. I said it's good. Screamed the reed with a mouthful of noodles, refraining the build-up tears from gushing out. The head chef smiled proudly. That's the face I'll never get tired of seeing. Heh. Am whistled. Whoa, she's digging it fast. Eat up, Naruto. Before it gets cold and you lose to her. Naruto had a soft look on his face, remembering fondly of the first time he ate his first ramen, giving off the same overjoyed expression. Refusing to let his tears taint the bowl he was consuming. With a small prayer, he thanked the god of foods for his fortunes. Itadakimasu. Hey old man. Get me seconds. Coming right up. Hours later. Naruto left the restaurant with his wallet light but his feet lighter as he approached Tayuya from behind, noticing that she seemed to be transfixed at the sun ducking below the walls of Konoha. The village darkened and the lights lit up as villagers filled the streets to head for their nightly casual fun or simply returning from work to their homes. You'll never see such peace where I come from. Muttered the messy Redeed, leaning on her feet with hands inside her pockets. Even before it turns dark, you'll find a couple bodies in the alleyways and a bleeding man in the street. Someone getting stabbed or a child being kidnapped at broad daylight and no one would bat an eye. It's disgusting how apathetic people are, myself included. Naruto was no stranger to such things when he lived his days as a wannabe thug. He stood beside her with a wondering look. I'm sure they were waiting for change, maybe looking for someone to look up to. She snickered humorlessly. The only thing you look up to is a guy nailed to a cross or burned at the stake for blasphemy. Those who are strong enough or simply lucky to survive would be taken in and experimented. Just another day in Odo. She heard him snicker and faced him with a confused gaze. Did I say something funny, shithead? He thumped his chest proudly and returned his foxy gaze. Once I become Hokage, whatever you remember will become nothing but a flicker memory. I will bring the change that everyone yearns for and start helping those in need. I'll welcome anyone who gets in my way and will end in my way. Be it through talking or a full-on fist fight. He struck his own palm and she felt the hairs on the back of her neck standing. This was not the same person she punched many years ago, though he may still be a loudmouth, they actually now have real meaning and action behind it. As if though whatever came out of his mouth would bend anything to his will. She could hear the tremendous power in his voice and the battle-hardened music striving for peace in his heart. She could get used to listening to such an arousing tune. Reflecting his expression, she folded her arms and stepped towards him without breaking their intense gaze. You're a real bullshitter, aren't ya, shithead? Heh. You haven't seen nothing yet, Tae-chan. Keep calling me that and you'll find yourself without a tongue to lick your own ass. I'd like to see you try. The partial observer would have assumed they were about to initiate a romantic contact when their foreheads touched, but the truth was far from it. Their thoughts and emotions were competing at the same wavelength, toppling and stacking on top of one another, refusing to let each other up. Without uttering a single word, they leaned back and grinned at each other like as if they came into a silent agreement. You're not as bad as I thought, shithead. Becoming Hokage, huh? With the things I've heard people say about you, that doesn't seem all that far-fetched. You single-handedly saved the entire village, mind telling me the story? Not at all. He chuckled as they make their down the street. First, what would you prefer? Stay in a hotel or my apartment? I've got a spare room. I believe I also heard you're notorious for being massive pervert. She accused him jokingly. He deadpanned. That's what happens when you stick too long with your perverted master. Later. You're telling me you convinced Nagato, the leader of Akatsuki, where Pitoman once a part of, and the man who painstakingly attempted to buttfuck the entire shinobi system, and the same person who ass-whipped the village into a fucking crater with a wave of his hands to believe in you and sacrifice his shitty life to repent for his misdeeds. You're wording it out a bit poorly there, but you summarized just about it. Stated Naruto as they climb up the stairs of the multi-storied apartment building. No wonder you have your own statue and a line of horny cunts ready to throw themselves at you. Laughed Aridit as she slapped his buttocks, which caused him to jump. Fuck. The hell was that for, cried the blonde, rubbing his rear as they reached the 5th floor. I don't mind the attention, but the kind of things they try to show their affections can be adorable to borderline psychotic. He stopped in front of a door and reached his keys. She curtly raised her brow. Sounds like you have a stalker. He nodded. At first, I woke up without my pillow and boxers to getting my couch shredded to pieces because I had Ino sitting there. She even left a note to be more specific. He exclaimed, inserting his key into the keyhole. I don't know who she might be, but I don't want to worry about it too much. He opened the door and entered with Tayuya peering over his shoulder in curiosity over her new home. Well, make yourself at home. He turned on the lights to reveal they have entered a modest-looking living room with a kitchen on the right side and a dining table between them. They dropped their shopping bags on the table as he led her down the hallway and opened the door on the right side. Flipping the light switch, he gestured her in. This will be your room. It's not much, but you're free to decorate it however you like. She calmly walked in and stood at the round white fluffy carpet in the middle of the room, admiring every single common furniture leaning against the blue walls. This is my room. He shrugged his shoulders before folding his arms. Of course, unless you want to stay at a hotel, I wouldn't argue. As long as you're under my protection, you're free to do whatever you wish. Just don't run around killing people. She snickered, approaching her white-fitted bed. TCH, you think I'd betray your kindness? Please, I may enjoy killing people I despise, but I'm not that low. She sat down at the surprisingly soft mattress, soothingly running her hand down the blanket with a small smile. This atmosphere was foreign to her. She lived her life under a rock, sleeping on blood-stained floors and beds someone died on. Yet, this warm sensation she hardly understood was immediately welcomed by the same person who yearned for it, herself. She felt lucky being picked up like a flower in the middle of desolate field. Her heart was heavy, weighing her down like an anchor because she finally knew it, she felt safe. Naruto quietly left her to her own devices, knowing it was a bizarre experience for her to be given such a chance in life, he knew the feeling all too well. Naruto, thank you. He heard her soft voice called out his name for the first time, expressing her genuine gratitude which made his heart skip a beat. But why did it feel like he heard it before? Shrugging to himself with a smile on his face, he began to prepare supper. Teaching himself how to cook was probably the most cost-saving and fulfilling way to redeem from his bad habits at eating instant foods. He had AM to thank too for forcibly pushing him in, out of all people. Ingredients out of the fridge and onto the kitchen top, he began to work his hands. Whilst cooking, he noticed more than half of the shopping bags on the dinner table were gone and assumed Tayuya had taken them in. When the luscious smell reached her nostrils, she went on her feet and peeked her head from the hallway to see him blissfully working out a light dish. They were about to have dinner together alone, she thought as she retrieved her goods from the table and lightly placed them into her room. She peeked her head again, curiously wondering what he was making as he mixed rice with water after rinsing them before boiling it. Porridge. Siding with seaweeds, mushrooms and sliced chicken. Could that be it? He turned his head when he felt a pair of eyes watching him and saw nothing unusual. Shrugging it off, he continued slicing the mushrooms. That was close. Thought the retreat as she stood in the shadows, peering her eyes once from the corner once again. He didn't seem to notice me good. When he placed the seasoned sliced chicken breasts onto the frying pan, it sizzled causing the smell to hit her nostrils like a freight train. They smell so good. I want to help him. She stealthily took a step forward, but her ninja skills and the wood floor betrayed her when it creaked. Naruto turned his head again, this time with a raised brow. Like an NPC from a poorly designed game, he chose to ignore it and flip the slices on the frying pan. Didn't you say you want to help him? The hell's wrong with you? He treated me to lunch and I almost wasted his wallet and now he's cooking for me. God, am I dreaming or something? I just want to take a closer look. No, I shouldn't get in his way. One should acknowledge that her mind was of a teenager at the peak of her hormones with the body of a well-formed young woman. When a part of the dish was done, Naruto turned around with a tray in hand to find the table was cleared. Did she put them in my room as well? How thoughtful of her. He muttered, looking down the hallway of her closed bedroom door as he placed the plates onto the table before heading back to the sink. In truth, the anxious Redeed was crouching in front of the sofa like a tiger who stayed still after its prey felt a disturbance. When she heard the tap water running, she breathed out a sigh of relief and peered her eyes over, again. Once the coast was clear, she crawled on all fours all the way back to her room. 20 minutes later. Hey Tay-chan. Dinner's ready. Tayuya tensed and sat up from her bed, bolting towards the door, and when she was an inch from the doorknob, she pulled herself back. No. He might think I'm desperate and weird if I suddenly turn up. Okay, just relax. She paced around the bedroom, making random shuffling noises and seemingly taking her own sweet time because of no reasons. 1 minute later. Thanks for putting my stuff in for me, said Naruto, pouring drinks for them. Don't mention it. She replied flatly, pulling the chair and sat down as she took in the sweet aroma. Wait, 3 bowls. She raised her brow at it. Is there someone visiting later? He pondered for a moment before realizing. Oh, I forgot to mention that I have a roommate. Remember what I said about not being worried anymore about my mysterious stalker? She nodded. She's handling it and the harassment eventually stopped. She? He nodded and glanced at the clock. She should be home any moment now. Tayuya leaned back against the chair and folded her arms, giving him an expectant look. Is there anything I should know about her? She should have thought about it. Why would he leave his home unguarded, making it easier for people to invade his personal property without repercussions? She's from Akatsuki, or formerly a part of. What? Yeah, the Akatsuki. After Nagato passed on, she had nowhere to go and I offered her a place. It took some time. Wait. She cut him off. Are we talking about the same person here? She's actually staying here. What was her name again? Naruto was about to answer until they heard the door clicked. Oh, she's home. The door swayed open to reveal a buxom woman with milky white skin about 10 years older than her wearing an exposing navy blue robe, revealing her pierced belly button, firm shoulders, her back, and a lateral part of her breasts. Followed by black spandex pants that hugs her hourglass figure very well and black low-heeled shoes which she promptly took off as she entered the living room. Her short blue hair tied to a bun with a touch of a blue rose flower. She had a cold neutral look, but when her amber eyes landed on Naruto, her soft lips curved upwards. "Welcome back home, Naruto-kun," greeted the older woman as she bowed, embarrassing him. "Wait, hold on." He frantically waved his hands and approached her. "You're getting it wrong. I'm supposed to welcome you." She giggled softly at his childish antics which made him flush a bit. She surrendered her black cloak to him and averted her gaze to the redeed. "Oh? And who might you be?" "Tayuya." She flatly introduced herself, feeling a bit off by her deceptively warm gaze. "Shithead and I were just talking about you." "Shithead?" She raised her brow at the blonde who sheepishly scratched the back of his head. "Oh, I almost forgot to introduce myself." She slowly bowed to the redeed who was slightly taken aback by the polite gesture. "My name is Konan. Otherwise known as the Angel of Aim. Pleased to meet you." "Same to you." She replied with same flat tone, keeping her guard back up. The former Akatsuki member straightened back up. "It is not unusual for Naruto-kun to invite his ladies for dinner, so I'm not surprised by it. In fact, they would periodically come back just to have a taste of his cooking." "Is that so?" She narrowed her suspicious gaze at the flustered blonde before returning to the blue-haired. "We're going to be roommates, I hope you're not against it." She lightly shook her head. "He notified me beforehand and I hope you like the guest room I prepared." Konan invited herself on the table and sat across from her. "It came as a bit of a shock when he suddenly came home and told me about you." Naruto decided to put the cloak away and Tayuya's eyes followed him until he was out of her vision as he went down the hallway. "You seem to know a lot about him. Does helping someone he doesn't even know part of his trait? Or is he simply obliging to it just to appear greater in other people's eyes?" Konan was not expecting such a question but took her time pondering it. "That's a good question. For you to ask such a thing I can safely assume that he unexpectedly tore your guard down, didn't he?" She mused. "DCH, don't dodge my question with a question. Answer it." She scowled, narrowing her brown eyes. The bun-haired smirked. "HMPH, very well. Though, I doubt you'd be satisfied with my answer. Anyways, Naruto-kun genuinely wants to help people. Whoever in need within his reach, he will help them. If they're not, then tough luck and he knew what his limits are and accepts them. This selfless path he walks on can be self-destructing and open to betrayal, he knows it and that is why he has the people around him to pull him out of a bad situation, even if it means risking their lives." "Sounds like a typical hero straight out of a shonen." Tayuya received a puzzled look and continued. "What about being expected to be something he wants?" "Naruto-kun isn't a slave to anyone's opinions, nor will he be subjected to it, but he's not ignorant either. I'm sure he have regrets, he's human after all. There are even things he would rather have done differently. One cannot grow without realizing their mistakes and learn from it. Naruto-kun is the embodiment of that principle." Konan finished and felt her heart lighter. Tayuya leaned back against the chair, still somewhat unsatisfied. "Spending only a day with him, I've seen a lot of people clamoring around him and I still couldn't figure why. I want to know what your reason is." She pressed her elbows on the table and keenly eyed the calm angel. She curtly tilted her head with a sly smile. "That simple. I am in love with that knucklehead." Cut. Naruto walked into frame. "Wua, you girls haven't eaten yet." They're gonna get when he entered the dining area, the hairs at the back of his neck stood at attention and he felt a chill running down his spine. Konan was smiling. Tayuya had a dark look and her bangs were covering her eyes. Did I miss something? What's going on?" Tayuya suddenly stood up and pointed an accusing finger at him. "Naruto, you fucking perverted idiot." Naruto gawked at the flustered fiery redeed. "What?" he squeaked. She shoved past him and slammed the door behind her with a loud thud. Naruto fell on his rear, confused as a squirrel missing his nuts. He stood up in a daze, using the wall as a support and perked his head in realization. "Wait, are you not hungry?" Door opened. Shoved him away. He fell face. "Poor porridge. Seaweeds. Chicken slices. And seasonings." He stood up. Shoved again. Fall on ass. Door closed. He stared at the ceiling, blinking in wonder. "Konan-chan," muttered the blonde. "Yes, Naruto-kun. Am I doing something wrong? Or is the universe just trying to mess with me? Are we simply living in a void of constant despair and eternal darkness? Or are we?" She leaned her elbow on the table, amusingly looking at the blonde questioning his very existence, then elegantly brought her hand up. Shards of paper started floating towards him. "Not all good deeds comes without a punishment, Naruto-kun." They revolved around his body before bringing him up. "You're not an exception, either." They smoothly carried him onto the chair before dissipating, except for a single shard, raising his downcast chin up. "We experience by living. Now cheer up, they're gonna get cold and it'd be a shame to waste them. You always make things look delicious. He snickered lightly, grabbing the porcelain spoon and landed his free hand on hers. He gave it a light squeeze and she just kept staring at his oceans. Do you remember how I brought you in? How could I not? She turned her hand around, letting their fingers intertwined. You earned a scar by protecting me from Toby. Fought against the people you protect so I can have a place to stay. Convinced Lady Tsunade to present my rights back and I ended up staying under your roof. I'm still far off from correcting my misdeeds, but the journey has well been worth it. She bring his hand to give it a soft peck, then gently pressed it against her warm cheek. I can't thank you enough for giving me the chance. Naruto chuckled lightly, this time taking her and returned the kiss. You say that every time we touch. I get this feeling. She sing-songed. And every time we kiss. I swear I could fly. And you feel my heart beat fast. I want this to last. Need you by my side. They spit out in laughter, holding their sides cackling as long as they could and struggling to recover. Konan wiped a tear and playfully punched his shoulder. Damn it, Naruto. I'm hungry and they're not gonna eat themselves. He sheepishly scratched the back of his head. Hey. Sorry, couldn't help myself. They began eating, chuckling and giggling from time to time. Unbeknownst to them, a certain brown-eyed was watching their exchange and retreated. Closing the door soundlessly, she leaned against it sitting on the floor and released a heavy sigh as she stared at the ceiling. Why am I like this? She was aware she was acting like an antsy teenager inside a woman's body and felt increasingly embarrassed thinking about it. A gentle scent was trailing up her nostrils and she naturally sniffed. Oh yeah, Naruto's porridge. She took a spoon of the still fortunately warm soup and squirmed inwardly. It's good. Cavern, location. Unknown. At the center of the pitched black chamber, a cloaked man sat in a meditative position on a complex summoning circle resembling a yin-yang. A disturbing rooted crunching noise bounced around the cave and the man opened his brown slitted eyes. What news have you brought me? His voice was low, always seemingly amused. It was just a contrasted head, sprouted inside of an open giant Venus flytrap. Everything was burnt to the ground. Nothing was left of the lab. Simply buried to ashes. It's just as you said, your little plaything was taken as well. The man let out a sinister chuckle. Of course. If you may know, she's healthy and currently experiencing a wave of emotions. He revealed his cloaked forearm to show a tri-pronged jagged curse mark pulsating in an ominous purple glow. So she's awoken then. That means the procedure went well, but I wasn't expecting her to wake up so soon. He obscured his forearm, gently running his finger over the scaled skin. My assumption was correct. His presence had an effect on her, though what they may result on leaves up to the imagination. You're a nasty piece of work, I like cha. I'm a bit hungry so I better get going. You know where to find us. Before you cannibalize on some poor fellow, he tossed a scroll and the Venus man effortlessly caught it. Deliver it to your master. Wherever he is. He began sinking into the ground. Understood. See you later. Once he was alone with the echoing sound of water dripple, he smiled revealing his gnashing fangs. Take your time, little one. Grow and you shall flourish. Stick close to him, you'll need it. Phew. The curse mark pulsed, and back in Konoha at the neck of a sleeping Redeed, it responded as soon as it disappeared. Tayuya. The sun shone through the thin curtains of her plain bedroom, albeit rather messy. Sprawled on the bed like a disfigured corpse wearing pink polka dots pajamas, she grunted in her sleep when the light pierced through her eyelids, before begrudgingly covering her face with a pillow. About half an hour had passed and she started muffling into her pillow, embracing it with all her snoring might. Shithead I want Muri she started shifting and slowly rolled to the edge of her bed, landing on the floor with a resounding thud, head first. Her half-lidded brown eyes stared bitterly at the white ceiling, dried saliva at the corner of her mouth. The wind blew through the narrow gap of her window, flawlessly flowing the curtains into a wave-like pattern, before gently settling by the window, unconcerned of the Redeed sluggishly walking towards it as she pulled them aside. Pushing the window open, she yawned longingly with squinted eyes, stretching her back with a squeal before leaning her elbows down onto the windowsill. From where she stood, less than half of the morning village was in her view. Trailing her beady eyes down at the street below, she followed each passers-by walking into their morning routines. Feeling herself a bit stagnate and drowning in boredom. She started whistling. Her music tuned into a blissful nature of her piece, attracting their ears, piquing their interest and swaying their light bodies elegantly. They felt the strain on their shoulders lifted, their once heavy heart rising amongst the clouds. What bothered them to make them frown was forgotten, accepting their faults and keeping their minds at peace. Whomever woke with a spinning head felt their burdens being washed away, leaving their heads at rest. A young couple at war, cry in hate, love and forgiveness, embrace for their future. A widow grieving in loss alone, smile at the memories cherished. Wishing to walk off the edge of life, backed away for the fulfillment ahead, knife dropped. Her stomach growled. Damn, I'm hungry, she moaned. I'll turn into a fattest at this rate, fucking hell. Swore the redeed, closing the windows, hearing the microwave dinged. Smirking, she opened the door and hustled down the hallway. What's for breakfast? Naruto was standing in front of the microwave, his back facing her. Morning, shithead. She greeted but he was unresponsive. She curled her brow and stood beside him. His eyes were opened, but his blue seemed to be somewhere else far away. Hey. She called, snapping her fingers repeatedly. None, not even a blink. She scowled, thinking for a moment before breaking into a shit-eating grin. She put her index finger into her mouth before sticking it into his ear. He fluttered his eyes. Body tensed. And shivered like 1,000 ants crawling up his skin. He slapped her hand away as she broke in laughter. What the hell? He cringed, sticking his own finger in an attempt to clean the hole. What was that for? She was holding her sides, cackling, then hands on her hips, sighing in relief. You had 1,000-yard stare on you, what's wrong? Did someone lit up your ramen coupons? He shivered at the image of it and curtly shook his head. Don't worry about it, he dismissed it, taking out the tray of lasagne from the microwave. Hungry? You kidding? I'm starving. She grinned ear to ear, rubbing her hands together at the breakfast. They began eating, sitting across from each other conversing. Show how youth life it hurts so far? Asked Naruto, with a mouthful of meat and cheese. Stuffing pasta into her mouth, she shrugged. Ith althriu, kathriathi complif. Ethipthath bithath the weapith store. Afthteth, youth doth hafter of mobi lyseth. Show, chef kath sethel youth amything. Sruth hearth. Hoth loth emith soothbathu waith. If you two going to speak like that the whole time, I may as well choke you both full as Anya. They turned their heads at Konan, arms below her bust, looking down scornfully at them. Sothy. They swallowed them whole and chugged a glass of water down their throats. Konan sighed and pulled out a chair to sit down between them. Naruto-kun and I have discussed something concerning you after you've been staying here for a week. With the amount you've been eating, Naruto could hardly sustain it. The blonde was about to speak up, but she held up her hand while the redeed listened intently. Even though he's titled the village hero, his wages aren't all that much, and they're about to run dry with how much he's spending on bills, equipment and provisions. So, I'm going to ask you this, she leaned in to emphasize the situation. Will you join Konoha's forces in order to support yourself? Tayuya stood up vehemently. Of course I am. I intend to repay this fucking debt. Shit. I ain't gonna be his bitch for the rest of my life. She exclaimed as the Naruto squirmed in his seat. Konan leaned back against the chair, arms crossed, satisfied. That's all we needed to hear. Well, eat up. We're gonna go field training later. Huh? Why? To test your abilities, of course. Konan grabbed a plate and filled it up as the redeed silently sat back down, anticipating for the later activity. Naruto looked between the two and felt himself becoming giddy, grinning inwardly. Training ground 3. Tayuya wore a sleeveless red shirt showing a bit of her belly button with a full-sleeved fishnet top. Long spandex pants and crimson red ninja sandals. An empty kunai pouch on her right thigh as well as a red bandana tied on her head. She crossed her arms and confidently stood at a distance before them. Well, who am I going to fight? This blondie. Konan didn't need her cloak this time due to the hot midday sun. She nodded to Naruto and he returned it. Taking out a single kunai, he spun it around his finger before tossing it to Tayuya. She caught it effortlessly and inspected the sharpened blade. Fighting him would be suicide by default. So, you're up against me. The Angel of Aim declared stoically. Is that so? She smirked, revealing her fangs. I'm kinda disappointed, I'd love to see how he earned such a title, but you'll do. She knew she was building up a BP front and essentially pissing off her opponent. That would not end well for either of them. Underestimating her would be her first mistake. If you're going to put it that way, I won't expect much of anything from you. Konan coolly shot her down, but that simply made her snarky grin wider. Whatever, bimbo. So how it's going to be? To the death, or are we gonna stand and stare at each other until one of us get impregnated by Chad over there? That snide remark caused Naruto to visibly fluster when she averted his gaze at him. Konan casually shrugged. I wouldn't pass on that chance. At least I could live with it. She snickered. With an old hag like you. Ha. I doubt you could make it stand. At this point, Naruto was as far away as he possibly could, hiding behind a tree, nervously peeking his head out at the two bickering on about. Having first-hand experience of how women settle their differences, he naturally opted out just to be safe. This wouldn't end well. Konan's eyes narrowed. A mouth as nasty as yours must have swallowed quite a questionable amount of beeps. Tayuya adjusted her stance, preparing to go up against whatever coming her way. And when you said you could live with it, I bet you whore yourself out to make a living. Naruto gawked. You sure talk a lot about fucking, but what do you know about love and sex? Virgin. Konan smiled wickedly, raising her hands up as sheets of paper started peeling off of her skin. Ha. You bloody bitch. I'm going to enjoy seeing you bleed. Konan snickered back. I'd love to see you try. All you have to do is to stab any one of these stumps behind me. She gestured at the 3-post behind her. Naruto told me not to kill you, but never said anything about flaying you alive. Don't worry, I'll try my best not to go all out on you. I'm not as cold as you think I am. Naruto felt his heart sinking, expression drier than the sands at Suna. Maybe I should have worded it differently. Sheesh, the people I keep under my roof. You have 2 hours. Konan exclaimed as Naruto sat down in Hergless on the middle stump. You fail when the time limit is up or when you're incapacitated. With piercing eyes, they stared at each other down without moving an inch. A breeze went by between them and a single leaf was flowing within it. As the wind died down, Tayuya suddenly took a step forward before the leaf landed. You know, Naruto voiced flatly, almost causing her to lose balance. Shut your trap, Dumbus. Sorry. He sheepishly scratched the back of his head as the two narrowed their eyes at him. Isn't this a bit much for her? As in, she just recovered not too long ago and hadn't taken the time to train. He pointed out as Konan crossed her arms, standing down and turned to face him. I don't expect her to beat me at first try. Which is precisely why I'm holding back to give her some room for improvement and growth. Furthermore, a flash of red-blue passed right behind her, cutting off mid-sentence. Ha! You dumb airhead. Looking away from your opponent was your first mistake. Tayuya taunted over her shoulder, getting halfway close to her target as she reared her arm to throw the kunai. The blue hair did not even budge. That's as worse as not taking your surroundings into consideration. The fiery Redeed instantly knew something was wrong when her other feet hit the ground. Whatever beneath her feet was supposed to have the sound of rustling grass, but instead, it produced the crunching of paper she was all too familiar. A bright flash of light engulfed her vision as she hissed a single word. Fuck. Boom. As pieces of dirt rained over the area, Naruto chuckled humorlessly looking at the blackened smoke. You just want to mess with her, don't you? Konan shrugged, glancing to the side. What makes you think that? Instead of seeing the charred Redeed, the smoke dissipated to reveal nothing but a broken log. Under forest cover, Tayuya clicked her tongue, though feeling a bit relieved she managed to escape the blast that would blow her leg up. When did she get the place booby-trapped? Probably at the very beginning. She crouched to the ground, peeking her eye over the open field. Tayuya knew that Konan excelled at long-range combat, but hardly knew what she was capable of using something as fickle as paper. If only I had my flute. Wrapping her hands around each other, she pushed her lips onto the knuckles of her thumbs. It's not as effective, but it'll do. She breathed in. Konan heard the call of an instrument, whistling throughout the entire field. She keenly listened in to pinpoint her exact location, but was unable to because it sounded like it came from all directions. She moved her feet and saw the trees swing along with the breeze. She felt her ears ring and her heart without a beat. She narrowed her eyes and held up a single hand before snapping her fingers. It snapped silently as the entire edge of the forest around her lit up without the boom of a bomb. What an interesting ability. Your music can shroud all ambient sound, muting them out completely. That's very useful. Konan mused, finally being able to hear her own voice followed by the sound of splinters and dirt raining down. But it seems to have a weakness. It can be overpowered by a shockwave, rendering it useless. She glanced to her right at the forest. Isn't that right? Tayuya ducked behind a tree, gritting her teeth. Fuck. She instantly noticed it. Just how observant is she? Silent harmony, as she called it. Effective for escaping an infiltration or conduct a massacre in broad daylight. For now, she was at least in a more favorable position and in view of her objective. I can't throw it from a distance, or else she'll simply blow it away, and I can't get too close without setting off a trap. I only have one kunai, for fuck's sake. I have to improvise somehow. She poked her head again and saw Konan was gazing at the opposite forest with her back facing her. The jutsu must have had an unintended effect in messing up her sense of direction. This might be her chance. She would use silent harmony again to quickly change her position before Konan could counter with an explosion. She only have 2 seconds before the jutsu dissipates and use that small window to throw her kunai at the post. After formulating a quick plan, she clasped her hands together once more and breathed in. An ominous whimsical tune escaped her palms, blanking the stage with her music once more as she took off. However, she became puzzled to see Konan not reacting to her advance. She chose to ignore her and kept on running. Once in range, she stopped whistling and reared her kunai arm to throw. Unfortunately, she felt her arm being wrapped by something and refusing to budge. A shadow succumbed her as she looked over her shoulder to see the angel hovering intimidatingly with sneering satisfaction. Tayuya scowled, not needing to see that the one out in the field was nothing but a mere clone. I figured out the massive drawback on your technique. Konan touted as the flies of paper shrouded her opponent's limbs. You can't hear anything yourself when I purposefully broke a twig right behind you. You're essentially deaf by using it, am I wrong? Tayuya glared at her, clicking her tongue. TCH, fine. I concede defeat. Damn. That was awesome. Naruto appeared into the clearing with a huge smile. I can't even hear myself think with that music going on, no wonder Shika had trouble against you. Konan dispersed the bindings, and Tayuya promptly threw the kunai into the ground before folding her arms and sharply scowled. This isn't over. You got that. The blue-haired shrugged her hands and faced her without a tint of emotion. If you say so. So, Hokage-sama, what do you think of her? Tayuya titled her head. Hue. Hokage out of the corner of her eye, Tsunade, along with Shizune, walked into clearing, causing her to gawk. I'd say we could make a good shinobi out of her. Holy shit. It's cow tits. A tick mark appeared on the twin-tailed blonde. You watch what you fucking say, you little runt. Yeah, I'm a runt. So what? I bet you boob job-ed the hell out of the Raikage. Tsunade cracked her knuckles. That's it. I'ma pummel this bitch. She stomped her foot towards her in an attempt to strangle the life out of her. Tayuya tried to resist, holding onto her wrists as her death grip was etched closer. Her temperament certainly needs work. Shizune pointed out, writing down on her clipboard. Aside from that, as a lone combatant she is capable of deceit and can work her way around an obstacle. I believe in a team, her skills can have a wide-reaching effect and beneficial in most situations. They nodded to one another even though the fight was uneventfully short. At this point, Tsunade already had Tayuya off her feet in a chokehold, still on each other's throat at least one of them is. Fucking hell granny you have a hell of a grip. The Redeed exclaimed chokingly, kicking up her feet missing everything but air. Damn, you Uzumakuses. Always so feisty and stubborn. Tsunade growled through gritted teeth. The hell you talking about screamed the Redeed in her struggle as Naruto curled his brow. The Hokage dropped the troublesome girl and hands on her big hips. Don't really know how I supposed to break it ya. We checked your DNA for any signs of anomalies and I got curious because of your red hair. We crossed your DNA with Naruto's and the result came with an 8% match. You're in Uzumaki, flesh and blood. What? The feisty duo screamed in unison. Tsunade shrugged like it was a common occurrence. Given your explosive personality, I wasn't really surprised. Come on, isn't this great? Two distant cousins from a once-known noble clan, reunited. This should call for a celebration. Cheered the buxom Hokage as her secretary deadpanned. You just want escape work, Tsunade same. Tayuya and Naruto were giving each other looks, unable to comprehend the sudden news. Part of them thought they should feel thrilled, but the outwardly part flustered. Konan gazed between the two and inwardly sighed, stepping forward. We should give them some room for now. Naruto-kun, I will humbly escort them to the Ichirakus. Will that be okay? Naruto glanced at the Redeed as she looked away and faced back before nodding. Yeah, sure. No problem. You brats don't take too long now, there's paperwork needed to be done. Tsunade cheekily told as she turned away followed by her secretary with Konan leading the way. Once alone, Naruto scratched the back of his head unable to utter a single word feeling a sheet of ice forming between them. You know, spoke the musician still facing the tree before giving it a light kick with her hands tucked behind her back. I'm actually glad there's someone like me. Heh, I feel a bit more relieved once I think about it. Naruto lifted his brow. What are you talking about? She turned around, facing him with a doubtful expression. I mean, I've known it for a long time. When I read your profile long ago, I've wanted to meet you, but we were enemies and if I did, it'll ruin Orochimaru's plan and I would be executed on the spot. Hold on. Let me get this right. Naruto interject. Is it because he knew you're in Uzumaki and if you tried to defect, your curse mark would be activated? She nodded. How come? Aren't you valuable to his efforts and if my knowledge is correct, he can have full control of you whenever he wants. I'm more valuable to him in a comatose state so I can be experimented. It's my blood he was precisely after, but his attention eventually shifted to a certain Uchiha. The former sound nin stated, leaning against a tree. Why are you telling me this? I don't know. She stammered. It may sound like BS, but I wanted some sort of closure. I wanted to tell you myself of my blood, but I wasn't ready. Naruto sighed. This was bothering her so much since she woke and he did not even picked it up. Tayuya. He laid a comforting hand on her shoulder, almost startling the Redeed. When I gave you a chance, I already forgave everything you did. You don't have to hold anything back anymore, he won't bother you any longer. She wanted to cry so much now. The chains in her heart that were holding her down no longer bound to her by some foreign subject. She slapped him away as she tried to wipe away the tears flowing down her cheeks. You idiot, she sniffed, covering her teary eyes behind her hands. Look at what you made me do. He took offense to that. Whoa. You're blaming me? He frantically looked around trying to find a way to ease her suffering. Come on, think. What would Hiro-senin do in a situation like this? Oh yeah. He then held his arms open with a crooked happy expression. Come on in, Tae-chan. Let's hug it out. She continued crying. Shit, she didn't notice me at all. Come, think again. What did Hiro-senin advised me when comforting a damsel in distress? Could it be if she doesn't like it from the front, surprise her from the back? Naruto snapped his fingers and thanked Jiraiya in heaven. Tayuya felt a presence behind her and suddenly felt a pair of arms wrapped around her waist. Hey, what the hell, she stammered chokingly, her cheeks flushed. It's okay, Tayuya-chan. You're safe with me. He whispered into her ears as she felt shivers down her neck. Gah. She cutely struggled, feeling her knees weak as she took deep breaths. He pulled her closer and her eyes widened, feeling the warmth of his toned chest. Let it all out, it's alright, I'm here. Saint, stop. Squeaked the tomboy, feeling her heart race. Would you like a massage? I heard it's very effective at relieving stress. Wait, her throat hitched and whatever she felt before was accelerated by 10 times when it hit the booster. His hands magnificently trailed up her sides as she felt the life literally being squeezed out of her. She was in a constant state of euphoria underneath his heavenly touch. Unleashing the core of her desires into nirvana as her life force went supernova as she quell in his passionate embrace. She felt the dam beginning to crack, her knees buckling at the immense pressure. Her mouth agape and a pint saliva in the corner of her lips. He whispered huskily unfathomable words into her ear once again and she felt her soul soar into the never-ending skies, leaving the cage broken, letting loose of the once dormant beast into a flurry of rage. And she screamed, not the type of scream he was expecting. She lost strength to stand up straight and he shifted to support her as she breathed heavily. Whoa. Tae-chan. You alright? The brown-eyed tiredly looked down at her feet, liquid escaping from the bottom of her spandex and an obscured mark between her legs. You did this? What? Tae-chan, did you say something? All he saw was her eyes flashing demonic red as she grabbed hold of his neck and threw him over her shoulder with explosive force impacting the ground, causing a huge crater. Once the dust settled in, Naruto was unconscious with his mouth wide open as the Red-Deed victoriously stood over him. You're going to pay for this. She grabbed his collar and proceeded to drag him back to the village, albeit with limping steps at first. Hokage's office. I now pronounced you as Shinin of the Hidden Leaf. Tsunade announced as she handed over the Konoha headband. Tayuya politely bowed before taking it into her hands and wrapped it around her waist. May your songs be heard and your loyalty ends with us. The metallic plate gleamed as she smirked, which mirrored by everyone in the room except Naruto, whom was stuck in a daze. She bowed again. Thank you, Lord Hokage. Rise up, Tayuya. Don't think I get chummy with you yet. As for now, you're under Naruto apprenticeship until he held your regard high enough for you to be placed in a permanent team. You got that, Naruto? He popped a bubble and blinked, jittering his eyes around the room. Naruto. What? Oh yes, you can count on me. Good. She nodded approvingly, placing a couple of scrolls on the table. You now have access to the armory and the quest board. Of course, you may use the shops in Konoha as well, provided if you have the yen to part with. Here you go. Thanks. She shoved them into her pockets and stood beside the blinking Naruto. Alrighty then. Good luck. I expect good things coming from you. They bowed to her before leaving the room as she waved them off. I hope. Shizune turned her head with a crooked smile. I hope you realized you just let in another potential troublemaker, Tsunade-sama. Let's hope it doesn't come to that, Shizune. But I get the feeling it won't be long till we heard something, for the wrong reasons. They sighed in unison. Naruto's apartment, 2100 hours. They sat around the dinner table and began to eat whilst Naruto rummaged through the void which was his wallet. Konan-chan, why is it as empty as my heart feeling it now? You treated us on a huge buffet with the Ichirikas this afternoon. Said the blue-haired after munching down on her rice. I did. Why can't I remember anything? TCH. Tayuya voiced her disgust. That's because you were knocked out the entire time as we ate right underneath your nose. I was knocked out. Why was I? Tayuya flashed her demonic eyes and the memories came flooding back to him. Oh. Tayuya-san said you touched her inappropriately without her consent. That is grounds for molestation. Konan stated as she added more chicken into her bowl. I fondly remember that is something you're deeply against. Naruto lost all color as if the animator forgot to paint him. I guess the phrase one who preaches the most, practices the least is a fitting term for you, in this case. She mused with a dangerously pleased expression until her chopsticks broke under pressure. She gave a very detailed explanation of how you touched her with your magic fingers. She tightened her fist and slammed it into the table, frightening Naruto. "How come you never did the same to me?" exclaimed Konan as she was about to tear apart her singlet. "What? You two disgusts me." Later. Naruto sighed as he washed the dishes. "I guessed we're going to start doing some missions tomorrow." Tayuya, whom was leaning back her chair with her legs on the table, cheered, throwing her hands up into the air. "Oh right. We'll start off by doing a few D-ranked missions." The read thumbs down. "Buo." He gave her an annoyed glare over his shoulder. "If you're gonna go out there armed with a single kunai, that's fine by me. Didn't you say you're gonna protect me?" He deadpanned. "That sounds as pathetic as babysitting a 20-year-old. You ain't a baby, right? Hey. My mind's still catching up." He rolled his eyes, muttering an as if. "Anyway, you said wanted a flute, right? Yeah, not the cheap kind either. It has to be made of metal. Like titanium." He turned off the faucet and picked up a towel. "That'll take you around 100 D-ranked missions. Good luck with that, Spunky." He threw it at her face. "Quit freeloading, so come over and help me." She lifted it off her face and rolled her eyes. "Yee, Nai-sama. Please don't call me that." They silently stood side by side in front of the sink, wiping the plates before stacking it away. The atmosphere was oddly peaceful, something he'd love to get used to around the feisty woman. Naruto glanced at the corner of his eye. She had a pleasant look and was strangely quiet. "Hey, Blondie." "Yeah? You know what this reminds me of? My mother, she always bicker me to wipe the plates with her." "Is that so?" "Yup. Always wanting me to clean the house and keep my beautiful hair cleansed, just in case, she says. Forbid me from leaving my room whenever strange men came knocking." "What happened?" "I don't know. Sometimes things break and other times, just sounds. Once a week, we would be in some alley and wait for a kind man to take her in. Then later, my mother would treat us to lunch and go shopping. It was fun." "Did you know she was pretty famous in her music?" "She'd stand there blowing into her flute as people look up to her in awe. It was pretty amazing, you should have seen it." "Wished I did." "We moved around a lot but stopped after she managed to buy a decent place for us to stay. It was nice and she started giving me lessons on the flute. I messed around a lot but she was scarily patient. Whoever beat the door during our lessons she would beat them to a pulp and start swearing at them." "Guess that's where you got your attitude from." "Oh sorry, I tend to trail around a lot." "That's okay. What about you? What's your mother like?" "Oh sorry, I said something I shouldn't have." No, it's fine. To be completely honest with you, I actually never met my mother. My father told me about her, it's a long story." "Well, judging by your stories, I think our mothers would get along really well." "You think so?" "I know so." Konan came out of the hallway and placed her hands by her hips, giving them an impatient look. "Hurry up, you two. Finish up your work, it's already past your bedtime." "Yes, Ka-chan." "Excuse me? I think it's too soon to call me that." As everyone set for bed, Naruto switched off all the lights in the living room and walked down the hallway, noticing the door on his left was not properly shut. He peeked inside and see her on the bed with her back facing him. He sighed inwardly and quietly shut the door before going into his darkened room where his concerned companion lay awake. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop," Konan told as he tucked himself in beneath the blanket beside her. "Our ninja ears are too sensitive to help it." He waved it off and set his back against the bed frame. "You're right. So, what are you planning to do with her?" He pondered in thought for a moment as he blankly stared at the sheets. Naturally, therapy would be good for her in the long run, but her mind's still in a rebellious state. Someone like her wouldn't bother opening up to a complete stranger, even if it's someone I trusts. Even so, it seems she was haunted by her past. I think her abrasive attitude towards other people is a way how she copes dealing with her past tragedies. It's a defense mechanism. Dealing with less people is easier than a group of strangers who would rather see you gone or stab you in the back when it benefits them. That explains her social behavior. Is that how she sees the world? It was how I to see the world, Konan-chan. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Bye bye.